cat. 3. Hey, at least it's fun for Avery, right? Yeah, yeah.
Hey, Paris and Amanda, can
Hi,
either of
Brandon.
you or both of you
Yes.
hear me?
Yep.
I hear P,
In the city's Little Village neighborhood.
Mandy.
I hear ya.
Hey.
Hey.
Hey, girl. Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman here in our North Side studio.
And I'm Paris Schutz reporting live from Chicago's Little Village neighborhood.
On the show tonight, a look at the historic $2 trillion COVID-19 relief package. Chicago shuts down its lakefront and 2 popular paths. We check in with Congressman Jesus Chuy Garcia in Little Village. And the city's performing arts community shares how it's handling the uncertainty of this season.
But first, another note about tonight's format. Due to coronavirus concerns, we've had to change things up a little bit, as you've noticed if you've watched all week. Brandis is in the studio along with Carol and Phil this week. I am out across Chicago reporting and talking to businesses and residents in various neighborhoods to get the view from the ground. And in a minute, we'll talk about Little Village. But first, Brandis, back to you with the latest developments from today.
Paris, thank you. The city of Chicago has shut down its entire lakefront, nearby parks, the 606 Trail, and the Chicago Riverwalk. The move comes a day after Mayor Lori Lightfoot warned she'd close off access to public spaces if Chicagoans kept flouting social distancing requirements.
Our lakefront is our treasure. It's really our jewel and sets us apart from any other place in the world. But congregating on our lakefront, to be blunt, is going to create a risk that is unacceptable and could lead to death. That is why we are taking these actions and going back and saying again, dear God, stay home, save lives.
And we'll have much more about the lakefront shutdown later in the program. The order also bans contact sports like basketball and soccer, and state officials have also shut down all golf courses. Lightfoot says Chicagoans can still get outside to exercise, but must avoid busy areas and stay home as much as possible. Chicago's top public health official also voiced those concerns.
The window to pursue a wide-ranging, aggressive response to the coronavirus pandemic is closing. The moves that we make right now, really these next few weeks, are crucial.
Dr. Arwady said she spent the morning at McCormick Place with other public officials looking at how the center could potentially be turned into a temporary hospital. City modeling shows the potential for 40,000 hospitalizations without an effective response to the pandemic. That, as the state today announced 7 more deaths related to COVID-19 in Illinois, bringing the total number of coronavirus deaths in the state up to 26 people. And there are nearly 700 new cases of the illness reported in Illinois today, bringing the total to 2,538. Filings for unemployment claims are breaking records here and nationally from the coronavirus shutdown. Nearly 134,000 Illinoisans applied for unemployment benefits so far this month. In the same period a year ago, the number of claims filed were just near 27,500. Nationally, almost 3.3 million people applied for unemployment benefits last week, shattering the record set in 1982 by more than quadruple.
We've got surveys reflecting that 1 in 5 American households have seen a reduction in work hours or a layoff, dropping 1 in 4 households below $50,000 income. And that information was collected a week ago amidst circumstances that are truly evolving by the hour.
In the Illinois Department of Employment Security, physical offices are closed for everyone's safety, but people can file unemployment benefits via the web and the call center. Call capacity and computer servers have been beefed up, and daily call center hours have been extended. From local businesses to healthcare providers to social service organizations, the coronavirus shutdown has impacted all aspects of daily life in Chicago. All this week, Paris Schutz has been getting the view on the ground in the neighborhoods across the city. Tonight, he's in the Little Village neighborhood on the city's southwest side. It's predominantly Mexican-American and home to a large population of undocumented immigrants. Paris joins us from 26th Street with more. Hey, Paris.
Brandis, you know, the predominant message here in Little Village is all hands on deck. And while the coronavirus has impacted every neighborhood in Chicago, it has especially hit neighborhoods like Little Village, or colloquially known here as La Villita, because there's a large low-income population, as you mentioned, a large undocumented population. It's a neighborhood that is dependent on local businesses and social service organizations. 26th Street, where we're standing, is known as the second busiest retail strip in the city, only behind Michigan Avenue. So it is a tight-knit community with lots of community organizations that serve as the connective tissue, and the virus has struck a lot of fear into locals because many of them are day laborers. They have been laid off. They don't have savings. So forget worrying about how they're going to make this month's rent. They're worried about where their next meal is going to come from. So Dolores Castañeda of the group Mi Villita, this is one of the groups sourcing food and sharing it to families in need.
I thought it's more important be safe right now, because probably later they can try to figure out how to find another place to work. But the thing we're doing right now is passing food everywhere. People share food, or right now we coordinate with people in the community to passing food for older population, that population that can go out.
And the other challenge in this community, undocumented immigrants, if they do show symptoms of COVID-19, many are afraid to leave their home. They're afraid to go to doctors or medical establishments for fear of their immigration status being outed. So organizations are urging them to go to community health organizations or simply go to emergency rooms where they can't be denied treatment.
Where can I go? Who is going to service me? And so it's like, Esperanza Health Clinic. Families are referred to there. The county families are always referred to. So it's like, no, definitely, families are scared, don't know where to go, and then don't know who's actually going to service them, even if you go somewhere.
So one of the organizations serving on the front lines now of the COVID-19 crisis is a local pharmacy we found called Farmacia Mexicare. It is a small locally owned pharmacy, and the owner there says that people are coming in wanting to be screened for coronavirus. They want information because they're afraid to go to the doctor. They're not sure where else to turn, and the owner says they are coming in and they're doing what they can to give information to these residents.
It's time to stand up with our community, with anything this community needs. And I believe right now, with all the information and the misled information out there, I think patients need a reliable source of information about what's going on, scientific knowledge to direct them where to go. And people are panicking because they don't know. They don't know what to do. So we're here to give this information and to direct people, and we try our best.
So it's an example of a small business that the community really relies on, and small business is the backbone of this community, especially on 26th. There are many shops that sell quinceañera dresses, so Mexican Americans all across the region come to Little Village to shop, and of course those shops are closed. Many come here to sample the cuisine at restaurants like Nuevo Leon on 26th Street, and that restaurant's owner, Laura Gutierrez Ramos, she's part of 3 generations of ownership there. She says business has drastically reduced as they've gone to delivery only. She's had to lay off staff, but she says she has promised free groceries to all of her employees from a market that her family also owns.
Doing shifts, alternating, and whoever's not working, we're giving them groceries. Single men $50, families $100 of my staff. That's the only thing that's left to do. We have to stick together as a community, you know. I mean, my employees, they're not going to go hungry. That's the only thing I can offer them, whoever's not working.
So her sentiments kind of sum it up right there. The community has to stick together because that's all they really have at this point. Now, many are hopeful that the federal stimulus package will provide some relief for business and residents. And in just a bit, we will talk with local Congressman Jesus Chuy Garcia about that. And now, Brandis, back to you.
A lot of need out there, Paris. Thank you. Now to Phil Ponce and what that federal stimulus and relief bill could mean for you. Phil.
Brandis, the U.S. House is expected shortly to pass a $2 trillion stimulus and relief package, the largest bailout in American history. Last night, the Senate passed the package in an attempt to save the American economy from the worst effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. But will it be enough to save workers and businesses ravaged by the virus? Here's some of what Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi had to say about the bill.
After days of intense discussions, the Senate has reached a bipartisan agreement on a historic relief package for this pandemic. It will rush new resources onto the front lines of our nation's healthcare fight, and it will inject trillions of dollars of cash into the economy as fast as possible to help American workers, families, small businesses, and industries make it through this disruption.
Last night, as you know, the Senate passed important legislation. We're very proud of the product. We think it is, we did jujitsu on it, that it went from a corporate first proposal that the Republicans put forth in the Senate to a workers first, Democratic workers first legislation.
And joining us now to give us their assessment of what's in the bill and how much it will help are Benjamin Jones, economics professor at Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management. Jones served from 2010 to 2011 as a senior economist for the White House Council of Economic Advisors, and prior to that at the U.S. Treasury. And Austin Goolsbee, former chairman of the White House Council of Economic Advisors and a member of President Barack Obama's cabinet. Goolsbee is now an economics professor at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business. Gentlemen, thank you for being here. And first, Benjamin Jones, if you could just give us a real-world sense of how much $2.2 trillion actually is.
10% of all the income generated in the United States in a year. It's 50% increase in the entire federal budget for this year. It's a lot of money.
And before we look at some of the specifics in the stimulus package, let's take a quick look at some of the highlights in the package. It includes direct payment to most Americans, depending on how much income one made, as reflected in recent tax returns. $250 billion more for unemployment insurance, $350 billion in loans for small businesses, $500 billion aid for hard-hit industries and states, and $130 billion aid to hospital. Austin Goolsbee, is there a consensus in the world of economics that this stimulus package is needed?
I think there's pretty close to consensus that this package is needed. I'd say there's a lot of disagreement and maybe approaching consensus the other way, that it shouldn't be called a stimulus package. The traditional use of the word stimulus is about, we're going to give you a tax cut. We want you to go out and spend the money. We're going to get some spillovers and try to generate economic activity. And this is really more of a relief package that we're trying to tide people over and kind of burn the money to keep ourselves warm while the heat is out. And that point of view says we've got to get control and slow the spread of the virus so that the economy can come roaring back, in the words of the president.
Benjamin Jones, whether you call it a stimulus package or a relief package, in your view, what are some of the good points about it?
There are several good points that are really not stimulus. It's really about social insurance and the safety net for workers. There's a lot in here for workers, extending unemployment insurance. Typical state unemployment insurance won't reach a lot of people who are self-employed, the gig economy type workers, independent contractors. So the bill additionally extends those tools for those kinds of workers. So I think there's a lot in here for out-of-work Americans to like, and it can really help them. At the same time, it's got a lot in here for businesses that might fear going bankrupt sometime soon as they run into cash flow problems. That's going to be a huge issue, and there's a lot in here to help on that front as well.
Austin Goolsbee, you call this a relief program. What are some of the weaknesses of the program that you can identify?
Well, I mean, in my view, the biggest weakness, and it's not a weakness for what this is, but it's a let's not take our eye off the ball. By far the most important thing with virus economics, as opposed to regular business cycle, is anything that slows the rate of spread of the virus is the most important thing for the economy. So I don't think that Congress should pat themselves on the back and think they solved anything. They've got to slow the rate of spread of the virus. And I would think that you would want substantially more, if not in this bill, in something that's about getting ventilators and getting more testing, massively more testing, so that we can get out of lockdown in the way we are now. On the merits of what this is, I think there's a second potential weakness on the $500 billion that's money going to big businesses. How is that going to be governed? And is this just going to be catch as catch can and whoever lobbies the most?
Benjamin Jones, how about the whole notion of the money going to where it's needed? Is it?
I think a lot of it is. There is enough, unemployment insurance is a really beautifully targeted way to spend money in this context. I think pushing money through local banks towards small businesses that are facing bankruptcy, loan guarantees, forgivable loans, that's also needed. But to Austin's point, when you're spending $2.2 trillion in a hurry, and a lot of it doesn't have an existing governance, or institutional capacity about how we spend it, one has to be super careful that the money is targeted to those who need it, and not just those who are influential and powerful with government officials.
Austin Goolsbee, for one example is that Boeing is getting billions of dollars, and yet our understanding is that Boeing has lines of credit that it can tap into. To what extent are corporations maybe getting too much of a break?
We don't know yet, but they might be. And it's not so much if you set up lending facilities that can be accessed by everybody, and that small business could get these loans, and they might even refund the loan so they wouldn't have to pay them back. That's one thing. It's quite different than if the president says, well, I think cruise lines should get money, and I think airlines should get $25 billion, and I think Boeing should get this much. Once you get into that space, there's a big danger that seat of the pants, whoever gets the ear of the administration gets the money, undermines the political viability, let's call it, for rescues at all. The one thing about this is, as long as this virus is continuing to spread and grow, we're going to need more. This is just a down payment. I mean, the money will run out no matter how much money they allocate to it until you stop that virus. And if people perceive 6 months from now that a whole lot of the money was wasted or went to big companies or the well-connected, I think there will be a lot of pushback of, well, why should we do that again?
Benjamin Jones, in your opinion, what will define success for this package?
Well, the package is fairly well tailored to the problem, but only in a short run way. And if it comes to the summer and we're dealing with this, possibly even in a worse situation where we still need to quarantine people and have all of this staying at home, the economy can't take it for too long. There's an incredibly difficult trade-off here between public health on one hand and economic success and wealth on the other. The only way out of this actually is, unless we get lucky and the virus just goes away, to attack the virus itself. And the piece that's missing to me is a huge investment in innovation, for vaccines, for treatments conditional on getting it, for infection control, across the whole set of issues that are going on here. If we fast forward 4 months and we spent $2 trillion and we're in the same exact situation and have to do it again, and we've really not made progress in terms of the underlying problem, which is, of course, the virus itself and how to deal with that, then it's going to be an awful, awful economic calamity in addition to the public health calamity.
Benjamin Jones, Austin Goolsbee, thank you both for joining us. We very much appreciate it.
Thank you.
And up next, Brandis Friedman and Amanda Vinicky with a look at how the state budget is being impacted by the pandemic. But first, a look at weather.
The novel coronavirus is taking a toll on many individuals' pocketbooks, but it's also hurting government budgets. Chicago Tonight's Amanda Vinicky has more on what it could mean for Illinois. Amanda.
Brandis, Illinois has had a lot of budget struggles over the years, still has the nation's worst funded pension systems. The coronavirus adds to that strain. Here's House Majority Leader Greg Harris.
Our expenses are going to be up a lot as we struggle to help our healthcare system and be sure that hospitals and doctors have the resources they need as we try to help our school districts and our colleges and universities, transit, be sure meals are delivered to seniors at home and they're cared for, and get medical assistance. And all that's going to cost money, and it's going to be a tough year to figure all that out.
Then there's all of the revenue the state is going to be missing out on, given the governor's executive order that all non-essential businesses be closed. For more on that, here's House Republican Representative Tom Demmer.
It's going to result for at least a certain period of time in significantly lower sales tax revenues, income tax revenues, as well as the suspension of things like revenues we get from casinos and video gaming. All of those have direct budget impacts to the state.
Nobody knows how long the pandemic will last, so it's hard to predict exactly what fiscal impact it will have. But let's just hone in on one of those revenue sources, sales taxes.
Collect about $750 million a month in sales taxes to the state. Now, you might be thinking, well, there's all those folks out there who are buying everything off the shelves at the grocery store, and that's true, but the state does not levy a sales tax on food purchases. So we're seeing a decline in a lot of the types of sales the state does have a sales tax on, and food is going through the roof in some cases, and we're not seeing that.
According to a new report from the state's nonpartisan Fiscal Forecasting Commission, the beginning of this month, the outlook for Illinois' economy was good. Then COVID hit. According to the report, it seems reasonable to offer a scenario with more devastating impacts on revenues in the near term than even the Great Recession. As a result, should revenues experience a decline of 20%, a revenue reduction of over $8 billion would be experienced. Lawmakers are in early talks about what to do about it.
Do we do a 6-month budget and then come back as the effects of the pandemic hopefully have receded and reevaluate where we are? There are a lot of different alternatives, and none have been really chosen yet. I wish we could have some certainty. I wish we could have an answer, but goodness, things are changing every day.
So, Amanda, when will lawmakers have to begin to make a decision?
They'd normally be in Springfield now holding appropriations hearings, but session has been canceled these past couple of weeks due to the coronavirus. Now, the regular deadline to get a budget passed is May 31st. Republican State Senator Dale Ryder says, yes, there's time, but he doesn't want to put off fiscal decisions for too long.
The clock is running on the session schedule, and what we don't want to happen is back ourselves into a corner so badly that we have to put something on the board in a rush, and it's either that or nothing. That's when mistakes get made.
Well, lawmakers are talking regularly on conference calls, video ones just like this. State law does not appear to have a mechanism in place for them to meet or to vote virtually. Leader Harris says they are in consultation with healthcare professionals about when they may be able to return to the Capitol to meet.
We go down there, several hundred, 1,000 or so people come with us who are part of the public process. Then everyone fans back out to every corner of the state.
Now, as for all those corners of the state, Senator Ryder says as of yesterday, there had only been one confirmed case in the 14 East Central Illinois counties that his district covers. If, and he was very clear on if, there continues to be that trend of a general lack of confirmed cases outside of the Chicago region, he says Governor Pritzker should consider exempting those areas from future executive mandates.
I think we need to have a serious conversation about that, consult the public health experts, but remember that the economic shutdown that we are experiencing right now that's been government mandated comes with a price as well.
The governor was asked today how much thus far the Illinois state has spent battling the coronavirus, and he did not give an answer to that question. Brandis, back to you.
Okay, more budget woes for Illinois. Amanda, thank you. And still to come on Chicago Tonight. Social distancing scofflaws prompt the shutdown of parks and trails, but could Chicago make more public space to get some fresh air? How the Chicago arts community is preparing for the uncertainty of this season. Illinois broadcasters are teaming up to fill state food pantries in a time of unprecedented need. And how one business is helping others by making free signs for their new shop hours. But first, with Illinois schools closed through at least April 7th and April 20th in the city, parents are suddenly finding themselves thrust into a new role they might feel unprepared for: children's education. Whether you are a stay-at-home parent, a work-from-home parent, or a parent working outside the home, managing your children's educational needs on top of the rest of your life could be a tall order. Just yesterday, Chicago Public Schools was granted approval to spend $75 million to maintain critical services during the shutdown and said it plans to roll out more guidance for parents juggling remote learning. In the meantime, parents are finding or struggling to find some strategies on their own. Joining us to talk about that are Lori Torres, a CPS teacher at Monroe Elementary and a CPS parent, and Nicole Rogers, a homeschooling parent with Grassroots Homeschoolers in South Suburban Madison. Welcome both of you to Chicago Tonight. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So Lori, let's start with you, please. What is CPS expecting from parents and students during the shutdown?
I think at this point, from our directive, CPS is expecting that parents support their kids as best as possible. Also, as teachers, we want our parents to know that we're accessible, that there are ways to communicate with teachers during this time away from school.
As a teacher and a parent, I mean, do you think it's possible for parents who are still working to sort of maintain the same schedule or the same routine and the same level of rigor and learning that students were getting at home while they're juggling all these other activities?
So I think one of the things that even myself as a teacher who has 3 CPS kids at home with me, different grade levels, of course, I had to come to an understanding that we are not able to maintain it. We're not going to have an 8-hour school day. That's just unrealistic. We have set a schedule in my home, built in with breaks that make sense, built in with a designated lunchtime, and my kids now know they have lunch and a quote unquote recess to follow, and they look forward to the breaks, right? But I also know that as a teacher, when I'm giving my kids one-on-one attention, it's way different than being in front of a classroom of 30 students, right? And so that one-on-one attention is direct instruction for 15 minutes, and my kid gets to go ahead and then complete work on their own for that other 15, 20 minutes, whatever that requires of them, depending on their age level.
Nicole, what's your advice to parents trying to maintain a school schedule at home?
It's unrealistic that you're going to have an 8-hour or even 6-hour school day. Being a homeschool educator, our time frame is anywhere from maybe 2 to 4 hours top. Our homeschool setting is more, it's more lax, more freedom, there's more structure there as far as time. So, we start, there's a window, and I have them choose their times. You have either 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., you have 11 a.m. to 3 p.m., or you have 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. Choose one.
What kind of resources are available for parents as they're trying to figure out what to educate their children on?
Yes. Well, it depends on the grade level, as it was said before, but there are a lot of free to low cost resources that are I want to give like a top 3, maybe 4. And that's khanacademy.org, in which a lot of schools use. They may be already familiar with that. And also Time for Life, that's really a full curriculum, K through 12th grade. And that's fee-based, but it's very low cost for the entire family. And then there are super teachers worksheets, where you have a lot of free worksheets for your students.
Lori, what kind of communication are CPS teachers, both as a teacher and a parent, what kind of communication are teachers having with their students and families as far as what their expectations are, where they are in the curriculum, and what they need to be working on?
So I think, again, it depends on grade level of the student. We have teachers who are dealing with primary kids who will set up things on a video chat with kids. We have just recently been given access to that via the Google Suite through CPS. There's also teachers who make those phone calls to kids that they know need that extra support. And we've been able to use these methods to keep in touch. Our school has also used their social media pages to keep in touch with our communities as well as our kids and their families. And so being at home, there are, again, some kids were sent home with enrichment packets, but there's also those websites that we use for support. But we also have to recognize there are some things that our littles can't do, and our kids who need different type of breaks and learn differently, who need to do math via let's cook lunch together, or let's go outside and look at these rocks and let's compare them. Those kinds of things that give them hands-on experiences, which don't require them to have internet access or access to a computer all the time. And I think that we have parents who need to know that it is possible to do this, even if we don't have access.
And Nicole, we've got about 20 seconds left, but I'll give you the last word. What's your advice on how much students should be allowed to do on their own? Obviously, the older kids can do more.
Yes, the older children can do more. So if you do have older children, you just want to have them to be self-sufficient, self-direct. When you have the younger students, then of course you have to be more hands-on with them, but it's more of a, discovery where the parent and the child is learning. And just like it was said before, of course there's this social distancing that's going on, but the weather is breaking. You can go outside, and there's even curriculums for that as well, where you have an outline and then you go out there in nature, look at the rocks, do certain things. And of course, play. Children learn through play. The little ones still in that creative stage of development. So let them play, let them burn it off, things like that. And woosah, keep calm.
Woosah, we're all learning all of these things, and especially the woosah part. Thank you so much to Lori Torres and Nicole Rogers.
Yes, you're welcome.
Thank you.
And WTTW is also here to support families with additional educational content for middle school and high school students. Our WTTW Prime channel will air an afternoon block of content covering science, social studies, literature, and history. You can find out where to watch Prime, so that depends on whether you've got cable or an antenna. That's on our website. And there you'll also find additional resources. That's at WTTW.com/news. As we heard earlier in the show, Mayor Lightfoot today shut down the city's Lakefront, 606, and Riverwalk after some Chicagoans seemed to ignore social distancing guidelines. But will taking away the supply of public space reduce the demand for it? As Chicago Tonight's Nick Blumberg reports, other cities have responded to the need for breathing room by creating more public space. But so far, Chicago doesn't appear ready to follow their lead.
Sunny skies, a high near 60, a bustling lakefront. Ordinarily, that'd be good news in March, but yesterday's crowds were cause for alarm and action.
Most Chicagoans have been doing their part, but many have not. And you know who you are.
This morning, Mayor Lightfoot made good on the threat to shut down parks and the lakefront. The announcement came first piecemeal, followed by an afternoon press conference.
For those of you who refuse to abide by this common sense directive to help save lives, we will arrest you.
Many Chicagoans are upset at the closures, at their fellow residents flouting the guidelines, and also at the feeling of being stuck inside. Many folks are making a point right now of going out for a walk or a run, something to break up the day and get out of the house. But how do you stay the recommended 6 feet apart if you find yourself on a crowded or narrow city sidewalk? One idea, closing off certain streets to cars, which New York City is testing out.
We have many fewer vehicles in New York City. Open streets. People want to walk, they want to go out and get some air. You want a less dense area. So pilot closing streets to cars, opening streets to pedestrians.
Some hope Chicago follows suit.
Looking at the streets without any cars, you just see all of this open space. Opening up our streets for people to walk and rollerblade and skateboard and all that is a good use of our resources.
Another idea New York's trying, adding more bike lanes. So's Bogota, Colombia. Mexico City's considering it. But despite the dearth of traffic, Chicago shows no signs of getting in on New York's act. The mayor's office didn't directly respond to a question about those ideas. The City Department of Transportation says it's listening to public health experts, monitoring other cities, and monitoring traffic to see if there are ways to improve things for pedestrians and bicyclists.
I feel like biking is good for my mental health. And right now it's a perfect opportunity to get around on a bike because there are fewer drivers.
Kate Lowe says while making the city friendlier to multiple ways of getting around is a good idea, bike lanes are often associated with gentrification. And it's important to remember that not everyone feels safe biking in their neighborhood.
We have to understand bicycling holistically. So plopping down bike lanes everywhere has, there's more complexity than that, than simply repurposing streets.
The lakefront is closed, trails and parks are all closed.
For now, with miles of public space in the city closed off, Chicagoans will have to find other places to spend time outside. In a statement, the Active Transportation Alliance urges the movement of essential workers to take priority and warns that more park and trail closures and fines and arrests could harm communities of color and vulnerable Chicagoans.
There's no magic wand that will fix this problem. Each of us, each of you, has a role to play.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Nick Blumberg.
And per the mayor's order, the shutdown of those public spaces is in effect until further notice. And now we go back to Paris in Chicago's Little Village neighborhood, where he caught up with the neighborhood's congressman. Paris.
Brandis, Congressman Chuy Garcia is on a plane as we speak to Washington to vote in the House on that $2.2 trillion federal stimulus bill that you just heard about. So we caught up with Congressman Garcia a little earlier this afternoon in Little Village. I began by asking him if he is a yes vote on that bill.
Given what we're seeing each and every day now, hundreds of people dying daily, many more thousands becoming infected, and scientists telling us that this is only the beginning, that it will get worse before it gets better. I'm ready to support the bill. I have some reservations, but we also have many good elements in the bill that are good for working class communities like Little Village and the 4th Congressional District.
All right, so let's get to some of that. Specifically for Chicago first, what is in this bill for Chicago?
Well, Chicago gets some help with Chicago Public Schools. Chicago gets some help with funding for the CTA and the RTA and PACE, so the regional transit agencies, which have been bleeding and hemorrhaging money actually because of the drop in ridership. They need urgent help. There's help for airports in the bill. There is something in it for every sector of society in the bill. We owe it to the American people, and it also provides something very important, and that is help for small businesses. The 4th Congressional District has some of the most thriving commercial strips anywhere. Many of them are immigrant rooted, so the help that will come for small businesses and for workers, so that workers who have been laid off can come back and be getting paid again, is very important. And then, of course, you've heard of the cash payments as well as the unemployment compensation that will be available for workers. Very, very essential elements.
We spoke with a lot of small businesses on 26th Street, very scared about whether or not they're going to be able to keep the lights on, once this is all over. Will this assistance be in the form of loans, payments, and how much will it be?
The reason that I'm excited about that part of the bill is that it will provide loans that are forgivable. In other words, they will turn into a form of a grant if the owners, the employers, pay their workers, if they use the money appropriately for rent, for mortgage payments, for utility payments, etc. So I'm very optimistic about that, and that element was included in the legislation. Senator Marco Rubio from Florida was a key player in that regard. It was a bipartisan effort, and it's one way that this bill will help communities across the 4th Congressional District and throughout Chicagoland.
In this district, in this neighborhood, you have a high population of undocumented immigrants. We spoke with folks that are worried that the payments to workers are not going to extend to folks that are undocumented, even though a lot of those folks are working every day too. So what's your message to them?
Well, unfortunately, the federal bill does not address immigrant workers who are undocumented, but it does help the DACA young folks. It will help other lawful permanent residents. There are many throughout the 4th Congressional District. So while they get left out, there are provisions in it that could help them with respect to access to health care. Hospitals and community health clinics are also finding relief in the bill. $120 billion will help alleviate the increased demand that they're experiencing, extra expenses that they're incurring during the crisis. So the bill will help in many of those regards. The state of Illinois will deal with some of the other issues as it pertains to other immigrant populations, but the fact that we live in a city that's welcoming, in a state that is a leader nationally, also may be able to provide assistance to those populations that remain vulnerable.
What can you say to hospitals and medical providers right now that are A, worried about running out of equipment, PPE, and B, worried that they're going to have enough room as we see these cases skyrocketing? Is there any more help from the federal government to deal with this?
Well, although we lost precious weeks in the initial breakout of the pandemic, the administration was slow to respond. I think there is a real full court press on all of the actors, on the federal government, on FEMA, on the other agencies, the Surgeon General, to get as much of the protective equipment to our frontline workers. It is one of the principles that I operated with, and that is that testing should be available to everyone, that the access to the vaccine when it comes out should also be universal, and that we need to take care of our frontline workers, and that any other bailouts that happen in the bill have to ensure that workers are not laid off, that they are paid health benefits, their wages are not reduced. We secure many of those measures. The other piece in it is the housing piece, which places a moratorium on evictions for federally subsidized housing. We couldn't include all housing in it because the Republicans resisted it, but there are good elements for working people throughout the district and throughout the metro area in northern Illinois.
Congressman Chuy Garcia there on a plane to Washington, D.C. Vote expected tomorrow. There's a little confusion over whether it will be a voice vote because many members can't make it, but he says he is confident there will be a quorum. And we'll be back to wrap it up from La Villita, Little Village, a little later on, but now, Brandis, back to you.
Paris, thanks. All eyes on the House in Washington there. As the Chicago arts community says goodbye to shows for the spring season, many are now left wondering when their next shows will resume. Our arts correspondent, Angel Edo, visited with a few of these companies late last week before the state's full stay-at-home order was issued to get a better idea of what their next steps are in the midst of the uncertainty.
After being forced to close their production, The Healing, 1 week after it opened, Jackie Taylor with the Black Ensemble Theater says working from home isn't really an option for her.
Well, I still have bills. I still have mortgages. I still have an operation that I have to keep up. I just can't let it, I can't close it up and say we're going camping for 6 months. There are things that have to be done daily. I have to have security. I mean, we have a 55,000 square foot facility, a Black Ensemble Cultural Center.
With 50% of her budget gone, Taylor says she's relying on funding.
You're dependent on ticket sales and you're dependent on funding. When your ticket sales are non-existent, then you have to increase your fundraising.
Deb Clapp with the League of Chicago Theaters agrees and says the performing arts community plays a bigger role than people realize.
If you remember, after 9/11, people flocked to the performing arts because they needed that, that solace that comes in being together with a group of people and experiencing something beautiful all together.
Downtown at the Joffrey Ballet, the dance company was forced to close their doors, but not before they ended their run of The Times Are Racing. And while they hope they're able to move postponed show Don Quixote to the end of the year, one of their more immediate priorities is helping dancers stay in shape.
We have been giving out lots of exercise balls and TheraBands, and for them to keep themselves in shape. And the thing for any athlete is if you start to lose 2 weeks of exercise, like full-on exercise, it takes twice that long to get back. Your body just isn't at peak level. They're rehearsing 6 hours a day and training an hour and a half before that.
At the Lyric Opera of Chicago, they were forced to postpone The Ring Cycle indefinitely, which was originally scheduled to premiere in April. A production nearly 10 years in the making, the opera company expected the show to put up big numbers.
We're estimating the direct loss as being between $15 and $20 million. And given how we cannot predict even from day to day what is going to happen, it's likely, I think, that there will be more cancellations and therefore more losses and more inevitable cutbacks.
Despite the loss, the Lyric remains hopeful that this unpredicted season will pass.
Chicago will get through this, the arts will get through this, Lyric will get through this. We'll be back stronger and better than ever.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Angel Ito.
And again, those conversations that Angel had with those arts leaders, that was late last week before the state issued the current stay-at-home order. For more information on these performing arts groups, visit our website at WTTW.com/news. Up next, how Illinois broadcasters pulling together to support local food drives.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part through the generous support of the Julius Frankel Foundation.
As the COVID-19 crisis unfolds and layoffs and business closures mount, food pantries all over Illinois are bracing for increased need. Today, the state's broadcasters, including us here at WTTW, have joined forces with the organization Feeding Illinois to urge viewers and listeners to pitch in and fill the shelves at Illinois food banks in this time of intense need in communities across the state. Joining us to talk about the drive is Kate Mayer, Executive Director and CEO of the Greater Chicago Food Depository. Hi, Kate. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. So are food pantries, are they seeing an uptick in people needing their services already?
They absolutely are. We're seeing more people showing up at food pantries all across the state. Frankly, our colleagues at food banks across the country say they're seeing the same.
Are you anticipating that need to spike even further?
We are. Not only are we seeing more individuals showing up at food pantries and soup kitchens, We have calls through the roof for people who have never had to go to a food pantry before, trying to figure out how to get help, as well as people who are calling our SNAP hotline in need of assistance in getting food stamps.
Now, just so folks know, part of this today, in order for people to help, if they would like to help, they can go to feedingillinois.org/unite. They can also text FEED-IL in caps to 91999, and we've got that on our screen for folks right now to see. Kate, what are some other ways that people can help?
So everyone watching right now should know that we are really fortunate in the state of Illinois to have 8 amazing food banks that serve every one of Illinois' 102 counties. Those food banks are on the front lines of making sure pantries and soup kitchens have the food that they need when our neighbors turn to them. And every single food pantry in the state of Illinois right now needs financial support, needs volunteers, needs food donations. I would also say we need people to remember that there are so many people in our neighborhoods that are going to need help, not just today, not just next week, but frankly for months to come.
How are many food pantries, how are they changing their processes to make sure that everyone is distancing, to make sure that everyone is safe from further spread?
So all of the food pantries all across the community are adopting safe practices. So everything from regular hand washing to making sure that volunteers within the food pantry are standing 6 feet apart, and also making sure that guests to those pantries are standing apart in line so that we can make sure that we are adopting all of the social distance safety protocol. But it's a challenge because many of those food pantries all across the state rely on volunteers.
And how is this food being distributed, Kate, and especially for people who can't leave the house?
So there is a network of partners coming together, government partners, as well as the charitable food providers who have been on the front lines of feeding our neighbors for months and years. And we are working together. In the case of the city of Chicago, we are actively partnering with the city of Chicago to make sure that homebound seniors can get meals delivered to them, both those who have had previous involvement with the program, as well as people who just find themselves for the first time in needing help. So there's a lot of communication happening between our government partners and between all of the nonprofit organizations that respond to our neighbors.
And before I let you go, Kate, are the needs of, urban Illinois residents, those of us here in the Chicagoland area, very different from those of rural Illinoisans? And how are the food pantries meeting those different needs?
So I'm going to answer that question 2 ways. And first of all, I'm going to remind you and your viewers of the really sobering fact that before this crisis, in the best of times, all of the food banks in Illinois were booming. Here at the Greater Chicago Food Depository, we were already serving 1 in 8 of our neighbors in Cook County. So we have a little bit of experience in responding to the needs of the hungry, but you're right, there are differences. In downstate Illinois, for instance, the challenge of transportation becomes critical. It's hard to walk to a food pantry when the nearest food pantry is 20 miles away. So working with schools, hospitals, other providers to make sure that we're meeting our neighbors where they're at, and making sure that they have the food that they need to get through this crisis.
Okay, Kate Mayer, Executive Director and CEO of the Greater Chicago Food Depository. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Even before the governor announced a stay-at-home order, companies across all industries began seeing a decline in business due to fears over the coronavirus. WTTW News reporter Patty Wetley has been tracking some of the creative ways companies have been trying to keep afloat, whether or not they're getting paid for it. Hi again, Patty.
Hi again, Brandis.
So you spoke with one of these businesses. What have they been doing?
So I spoke with Tony Grammatis, who is the owner of Snappy Printing and Graphics up in the Ravenswood area. And he prints all sorts of logo merchandise for businesses like signage, hats, t-shirts. And he said it was as early as like February, he started noticing his business was kind of falling off. And then he said, and then it went off the face of the earth. So he started having to lay people off. And then when Governor Pritzker's order came through, kind of like that was the end of business for him. So he had the equipment and he had the materials, and he offered to start making banner signage for free for any small business that wanted to advertise that it was still open.
And Patty, why is he doing this? Why is he doing it for free at that?
Well, he's a small business owner himself, and I mentioned some background in my article, some tough times that he's faced as a business owner. And it's important, I think business owners are understanding how interconnected they all are. And if you serve small businesses, it behooves you to keep small businesses operating. But it's also actually a great marketing tool on his part. It gets his name in front of business owners, and it builds goodwill. So he's kind of like karma, if it exists. When these businesses, when things come back, they get back to normal at some point, maybe they'll remember him. Hey, remember that guy who made the free sign for us? We need new mugs. We need new polo t-shirts for our staff. Let's give him the business.
Okay. Patty Wetley, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Brandis.
Of course. And you can read Patty's full story on our website. There you'll also find out how to request a free sign for your business. That's at WTTW.com/news. It's been quite a week in Chicago, and Paris Schutz has been all around town checking in with people and businesses about how the coronavirus pandemic has been affecting their lives. Paris joins us once again tonight from the Little Village neighborhood. Paris, remind us where you've been this week and talk about some of the similar stories you've heard around town.
We've heard so many stories, Brandis. So we started the week in Chinatown on the south side. Then we ventured north to Devon Avenue, also known as Little India. Last night we went to the South Shore community, and tonight, of course, in Little Village on the southwest side. And what this reinforces to me, not that I ever thought any different, but the neighborhoods truly are the heart and soul of Chicago. And the local businesses and community organizations are the heart and soul of these neighborhoods. And the thing that these neighborhoods have in common, many of them are lower income. They do struggle with higher rates of violence. They are mainly immigrant populated, but they're such tight-knit communities, and in communities like this, they depend on local businesses because these businesses have to have specialties that serve these communities. You can't have a chain come in here and serve these communities well. So the local business, they operate on thin margins, but at a time like this, they are essential to the community. All these things have to work together: the business, the social service community, the resident. And we've just had so many examples of business owners, medical supplies person on Devon, pharmacy here, that have just stepped up for their community. So that's the spirit in these neighborhoods. It's really difficult times, but a lot of positive outlook from the locals in these communities. And now, Brandis, we'll go back to you.
And Paris, obviously different communities, different people, but it seems like they're all, we're all experiencing some of the same things. That's what's happening there.
Absolutely.
So that's our show for this Thursday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news.
You can also get the show on podcast or the PBS video app. And please join us tomorrow night at 7 for the Weekend Review.
And now for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you for watching.
Closed captioning for this program is brought to you by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, serving Chicago as a personal injury law firm since 1984.